Hi, I'm Karmina Constantino. Today on Talkback, the national ID system. For years it's been proposed, and for years too it has fallen dead in the water. Now, however, it is said to finally see the light of day as the president is expected to sign it into law. So today, let's talk about the anatomy of this system that promises, among many things, to bring government closer to the people. But first, its pros and cons.
For years, Congress has tackled measures proposing a national identification system, but these never went past the legislative hurdle. Those who have pushed for it say a national ID system would streamline official transactions, reduce the inconvenience of having to carry multiple IDs from different government agencies, and even help deter terrorism and crime. But critics are adamant a national ID system would be a danger to citizens, raising fears of invasion of privacy and violations of human rights. Now, the proposed national ID system inches closer to becoming a law after both the House and the Senate have agreed to a common version of the bill, the farthest that this proposal has come along in the legislative mill in its history. As if to allay fears of critics, proponents say the reconciled bill has trimmed the number of pieces of information needed for the ID system and stresses the ID security features. But opponents question the security of citizens' personal information from data breaches and see the national ID system as a tool of the Duterte administration to stifle dissent.
Yung dagdag bala yan sa Duterte administration na mahilig magpatahimik, manggipit, magtapak dun sa karapatan, mag-criminalize ng dissent noong mga vocal na tumututol sa kanyang mga patakaran at palisiya. Dahil yan ay maaari na gamitin sa paniniktik, sa mas pinaigting na surveillance.
Hindi pwedeng buksan kung walang court order. Pangalawa, kung wala pong consent ng individual. At maaari lamang itong buksan kung merong compelling interest ng ng safety at saka ng public health.
Palace meanwhile expresses support for the measure, marked as one of the priority bills of President Duterte, adding that the president is ready to sign it once it reaches Malacanang.
Talking to us, Muntinlupa Representative Ruffy Biazon, co-author of one of the proposals for a national ID system. And Bayan Muna Representative Carlos Zarate, who is opposing the measure. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. All right, let's start off with Congressman Biazon first. What to you is the biggest selling point of having a national ID system?
Well, for me, one of the biggest selling points is having a database that would enable government to deliver service, to monitor the delivery of service, and for people to have easy access to providing their identity to those they transact with, whether it's for public or for private purposes. I first filed the bill back in 2001 during my first term, and it took 17 years to reach this point. But I think it was also necessary to undergo that length of time because some of the provisions refer to some recent laws that were passed that would strengthen the proposal to have a national ID system.
All right, Congressman Zarate, let me go to you now. Based on the explanation, looks good on paper, but to you, it comes at a price.
Yeah.
So why are you opposing this?
Well, Karmina, we think the problem in the delivery of services is not because we lack the national ID system. In fact, we are apprehensive because we raised these issues in the floor. 2 points. So one is the possibility that this can be weaponized to place the critics of the administration, of the government in surveillance. Second, up to now, we cannot be assured that the data that will be placed in a centralized agency like the PSA will be protected in the advent of so much data breach now that is happening in our country. So the potential of violating our right to privacy, which we believe is the bedrock of all our rights, are there. We don't need, we believe that the national ID system is not the solution to, again, the failure or the problem in the delivery of national social services, even on the issue of to deter the commission of crimes and even acts of terrorism.
So let's understand this, Congressman Biazon, being one of the co-authors. Once you're born, once you exist already, you're going to be given a number. Is that
Yes,
correct?
under the proposal, the current bill, upon birth, you'd be given a number which would be used as a reference for the national ID that would be issued to you. Unlike in the current scenario, where you only get an ID when you apply for it. And there are some instances where individuals are unable to get IDs because you either get one from the COMELEC if you're a registered voter, you get one from PhilPost if you want to be to have a postal ID, and or a driver's license if you're issued one. That's the only time you get an ID.
And Congressman Zarate, there are cases that even having a birth certificate is not available to a lot of people. We've heard cases that they just failed to register the birth. They just didn't see it was necessary. So to that problem, what is your solution if you are not in agreement with having a national ID system?
Well, I don't know, with the bicameral version, if it's already mandatory for each and every Filipino born or yet to be born, that will have a national ID system. But again, in the past, services are delivered, not because we have IDs or we don't have IDs, and what we see as the biggest problem here is not actually the lack of ID. For example, year in and year out in our national budget, we keep on slashing the budget for basic services, health, housing, education. Second, there's too much bureaucracy as we see it. And third, how do we prioritize our budget? So then again, as to the question, is it really necessary for a person to obtain an ID before he can get the necessary services from the government? In fact, we believe that this will even create some sort of discrimination later on. Can you imagine the logistical requirement? For example, in Mindanao, our indigenous peoples, forcing them to get these biometrics and to obtain this ID. What if even if with these requirements now they cannot obtain an ID, then they cannot already avail of the services from the government? Is that what the government is saying?
He makes a good point. So what is your reaction to that?
Let me cite an example. In our city in Muntinlupa, we issue a city card. And what the local government uses that for is to use it in relation to the services that are being given. The city is able to monitor what areas still have to receive those services, because they are able to track down how many people have requested for medical assistance, how many have availed of scholarships. So the city government is using that information to deploy its resources more equitably. They know which area has not yet been touched on for example, in the distribution of study assistance, again, medical services. So it's that kind of scenario where you can use the database. It's the database that's the key factor there.
But basically, you're presenting a situation where it's post the service, or sometimes even post the disaster, like the Imvaxia, for example. The whole madness that came out of that. It would have been so much more easier to trace all those who were vaccinated if an ID system had been in place.
Not necessarily, I think. If only before we, implement such a massive program, we go through all the processes, not just massive vaccination without even registering all these students who are involved. But then again, probably in Muntinlupa that's good, but in a nationwide scale, I can just imagine the, the administrative and logistical requirements of that. And also because there are already existing IDs that we have. And I think what we need here is for an efficient delivery of services, if that is what the purpose of the national ID system is really about, is to make our bureaucracy even more efficient. No?
You don't need a number for that. That's what you're saying.
Yes, yes.
All right. Let's talk about how this national ID system isn't exclusive to the Philippines. There are a lot of countries already. I think we belong to 9 countries who don't have that kind of a system in place. There are other countries who say they implemented it because they wanted another layer between the state and the terrorists, between the state and the perceived enemies of the state. This, according to these countries, helped them to monitor those so-called enemies of the state. But in the news, we've heard a lot of terrorist attacks happen, even with the national ID system in place in these countries. What do you say to that?
Well, yes, it could be used for security purposes, but mainly it's being seen now as a principal tool of governance. When we first lobbied for the passage of a bill, it was really more for security purposes. But as the time went on, it has evolved. Even the concerns against the bill or the proposal, with the passage of recent laws, concerns about abuse of the system has been addressed. We have the Data Privacy Act, we have the Philippine Statistics Act, all of which have addressed the concern about the possibility of the system being abused. So I would say that over the years and the debates that have gone about this, I think the scenario has changed now. And with technology being a principal tool of governance, the ID system, the database that would be generated from it would help for government to analyze how they deliver service and how they will bring it to where it is needed.
Congressman Zarate, do you have a license or an SSS number or perhaps a PhilHealth card?
Yeah.
All right. And do you think that, having said that, government already has your data stored, right? And you've been critical of the administration. So do you feel, or at any given point, did you feel that this data, your personal data that's with government already, was used to further enhance their surveillance of you, if it is happening right now, given that you've been critical of the administration?
Well, probably. No? But again, I was saying, I have an SSS ID, I have a driver's license. I can use my driver's license for purposes that it was made for, no? And my SSS ID for SSS-related matters. You don't need to place all these eggs in one basket, because the potential of mining all this information about your SSS, about your, about everything about your health is there. And that is the worrisome part, no? Because every time, and when you centralize all this information, once that data is breached, all your information will be taken at one time. So during the floor debates, the authors, or those who are proposing for this bill, cannot really give an assurance, because they cannot, no? That 100% this data will be absolutely protected, no? As what we have seen.
So if it's not increased surveillance on perceived enemies of the state, what else could this possibly what could this possibly bring to those unsuspecting Filipinos who have all these information, vital information, in just one repository of information?
Well, this is no different, Karmina, no? Nung unang panahon, no? During the Spanish time, they required us to have cedulas. What is the purpose of the cedula? It's actually, of course, now we may call it governance, but actually it's control of the population. And once you have this national ID, this is a tool for mass surveillance. No? The government can track down all your movements, no, by just using one one tool. This is the national ID system. And especially now, as part of the national ID proposal, our biometrics in our iris scan will be also inputted in that national ID. So everything about your person will be already given to the government. And all we can say is we have to trust the government. Our records in the past and even up to now gives us reasons not to trust the government, because the government can always use this in some as a tool to oppress the people, to suppress our rights, or some tyrannical acts of the state.
But okay, let me go to Congressman Biazon now, because we're running out of time, at least for this portion of the show. But the bill also promises financial inclusion, increased opportunities to those who will have that number. Tell us how that outweighs the fears of Congressman Zarate.
Well, I mentioned earlier that it could enable government to be able to analyze how it delivers its services. So as far as inclusion is concerned, those who are left out under the current system because they're under the radar, they'll be able to avail of those services.
But isn't it the job of the LGUs and of government to make sure that no one is under the radar?
Well, yes, but sometimes, like I said, as an example, there may be some people who are not in the awareness of local government because they're not in the system. So this is one way of including everyone in the system, finding out that it's analysis of the data that will be generated. The fears of surveillance is that government will always have the ability to surveil you, whether there is this
via number
national ID or not. But for example, with biometrics, we can ensure that there will be no cheating in the elections. Because right now, you can easily have double registration, you can have flying voters, but if it's connected to a biometric system, you'll ensure the reliability of elections. So that's another benefit to that. So we just think that on the fears of surveillance, government will and can always have the ability to do that. But with an improvement in the system, in information, we can address a lot of concerns in society.
But how do you handle that sensitive information now? We're going to talk about data handling when we come back. We're going to have to take a quick break. Talk back on ANC. We'll be right back. Stay with us, please.
To paraphrase the ancient Greeks, true wealth is the full use of your power.
And we're back. You're still with Talkback here on ANC, and still talking to us, Muntinlupa Representative Ruffy Biazon and Bayan Muna Representative Carlos Zarate. We're talking about the national ID system, the pros and cons of it, the anatomy of this system. Okay, let's talk about data handling, because to me, that's really an important thing. And I'm not even talking about government surveillance here. I'm talking of that one rogue person in a dimly lit room accessing this information and doing whatever he wants to do with it. What is your fear, or do you think that there should be no fear about that because you've got it all figured out?
No, we should be fearful of such a scenario, and we are, of course. But at present there are some laws that are in place. And of course, aside from that, it should be incumbent on the implementation of the law that the system, the IT system that would be put into place should be secure. Again, that fear is already applicable to the current scenario, even without the national ID system. Anybody can possibly hack the database of LTO or of SSS, the COMELEC, etc. So we just have to put into place certain security measures. Now, as far as the law is concerned, again, there's the Data Privacy Act that is already there, and the Philippine Statistics Act provide for such. And in the design of the IT hardware that would be used, then definitely we should be putting in the right security measures. That's something that you can't put into the law.
Exactly.
But it would be into the design of the system.
But even so, laws are very different from reality, Congressman Zarate. So what do you say to that? That
well,
fear?
That's precise. In April this year, the National Privacy Commission summoned several agencies because of the breach of data, schools, agencies. And so even if there is a law, for example, the Data Privacy Act, it's not a guarantee that there will be no breach. Especially now, when the proposal is all this data will be centralized under the Philippine Statistics Authority. We have raised this before that our civil registry now is outsourced to a foreign company, Unisys. And possibly all these processes regarding the national ID system will also be outsourced, possibly also to Unisys. So it really raised a red flag. Can you imagine all our information in the hands of a foreign company? And as I've said, it can be used if there's a rogue employee or anybody.
And it's happened in the past. May not be here, but in other countries.
Can be used in crimes, in commerce, and all other purposes. The Commission on Election Data, the breach. I've read an article that it's now uploaded on the dark web. So we will really never know what is the extent of the damage caused by that breach with the COMELEC. So that's the biggest concern actually. And as I've said, we cannot just set this aside in this kind of proposal.
All right, let's switch sides now here. Congressman Zarate, what do you think? I asked you in the beginning your apprehensions about it, but what do you think about this bill? What is the absolute best that it could bring?
For me, best, additional collection of an ID. But I think my IDs now are enough, and I can use this in facilitating all my transactions, whether in public or in private. There is no need for a new ID. We have 2 billion for this year's budget. Even without the approval yet of a law, we already have a 2 billion. To me, the best way to use this 2 billion is to help our constituents. Sa problema nila sa nagtaasan ng taxes. And in the next several years, the budget will be increased, because we have to cover, as proposed, we have to cover all. So can you just imagine ang kakainin nun sa ating national budget?
Let me go to Congressman Biazon now. The absolute worst that this system can bring if the bill is ratified into law.
Well, of course, we go to that fear of a hacking of the system. But it's something that we think it can be addressed. It can be prevented. But definitely at the hands of somebody who has evil intentions, the access to the database would be a concern.
All right. Earlier today, here on ANC, we had Finance Undersecretary Carl Chua saying the implementation of the train law mitigating measures will improve once the national ID system bill is ratified. Congressman Biazon, how exactly will the national ID system improve the mitigating measures of the phase 1 of the train law?
Well, I can just I haven't heard his explanation, but I can just assume that he would be referring to the concept of the national ID system to be used in ensuring that the right people receive the assistance of government. So if there would be some subsidies that would be released by government, they would go to those who are already identified under a system of the national ID. That's the only thing I can think of, because I haven't heard his explanation yet.
Well, I cannot. I'm wondering how, because if you have a national ID, will it stop the implementation of the excise taxes on train, on the domino effect of the excise tax on petroleum on the basic goods? Will it stop the other adverse effects of the train law? As of now, even on the issue of unconditional cash transfer, I think there's a problem there. How to deliver this? How much more for our affected drivers and other sectors? So I don't know.
It looks like it's a done deal, though. I mean, news last week was that the president is expected to sign it into law. What have you been hearing? Done deal?
It is the same thing. I can just surmise from how the president thinks that he would support or sign the bill once it gets to him.
And once it is signed into law, what's the game plan here, the backup game plan?
We will continue our advocacy to oppose this bill, and if it becomes a law,
are you going to question it before the Supreme Court?
We are open to all the options. Are open to us. We have to read the law as signed, because as it is now, I have to be candid, we have yet to see the final version of the YCAM. But again, it's safe to say that those concerns that we raised before are still present.
But whatever it is, right, whether you're for or against it, I think there has to be engagement of the people to really look into this, because this could possibly change their lives, whether it's for the better or the worse.
Yeah, because after this, I will no longer be known as Carlos Zarate. I probably be known as Mr. 1234, no? Because you have already a reference number, and this is the reference number that will be scanned every time you have a transaction with the government, no? And that's it. That you will be tagged already, no? Anywhere you go, this national ID system will be a sort of your internal passport that can be used by the government to, to surveil, and to those who can access your information, they can use this.
And in closing, you're saying, so what's wrong with that? Is that what you're saying?
Well, to me, the benefits outweigh the fears.
That's it?
That's it.
All right. Congressman Zarate, Congressman Biazon, thank you, gentlemen, for talking to us. That's all the time we have. You can catch this episode on iWantTV or TFC.tv. I'm Karmina Constantino. Talk to us again next week on Talkback.